On the 24th of September 1998, eBay, the online auction company, sold shares to the public at $18 each, underwritten by Goldman Sachs. The document it filed to do that is the one where a company has to set down everything that could go wrong before it takes the public's money. And in it, eBay told its future shareholders, in plain words, that it does not compensate users who believe they have been defrauded by other users. This is the story of the company that wrote that sentence down and of what it cost. The same filing said eBay had no power to make a buyer pay and none to make a seller deliver the goods. Those were the terms. You sent your money to a person you had never met, in a place you had never been, for an object you had seen one photograph of, and the company standing in the middle told you in advance that if it went wrong, that was between you and the stranger. By the last day of 1999, 10 million people had accepted those terms, and 3 million things stood for sale at any given moment. It started with a broken laser pointer. A Canadian named Mark Fraser sent $14.83 to a stranger he had never met for a device that did not work. The seller emailed him to make sure he understood it was broken. Fraser wrote back that he collected broken laser pointers. By eBay's own account, it is the first thing anyone ever bought on the site. Antiques, coins, collectibles, computers, memorabilia, stamps, and toys. 3 years after Fraser's laser pointer, that was the list the company put in writing to describe what strangers were now selling one another. Why would you send money to a stranger? Pierre Omidyar built the thing, and he originally called it Auction Web before it became eBay. The founding story attached to him is one he has himself corrected. The version in circulation is that he wrote the site so a girlfriend could trade Pez dispensers. Asked about it in October 2000, Omidyar said the business success was real, but that the birth of the idea is definitely a media-enhanced story, and that the Pez dispensers had been a small part of his inspiration at most. His first public relations manager is reported to have explained why the other version traveled. Nobody wants to hear about a man who wanted to build a perfect market. They want to hear he did it for his fiancée. Fraser's transaction is the entire product. The invention was a number printed beside a stranger's name, built out of what everyone who had dealt with that person before was willing to say about them in public. eBay never sold antiques or coins or stamps. It sold the reasonable belief that the person holding them would put them in the post. The filings give that number a name. In eBay's own words, the feedback forum encourages every eBay user to provide comments and feedback on other eBay users with whom they interact, and offers user profiles carrying the ratings. The registration statement is blunter about why it existed: to reduce the anonymity and uncertainty of dealing with an unknown trading partner, and to help overcome initial user hesitancy when trading over the web. That is the company saying, in the document it took to market, that people did not want to do this. Beside the forum ran a program called Safe Harbor, organized into investigations, community watch, and fraud prevention. Its competition, by its own description, was classified advertisements, collectibles shows, garage sales, flea markets, and auction houses. It competed with all of them using a clock. The company wrote that its auction pricing format creates a sense of urgency among buyers, and called the whole arrangement an efficient and entertaining format, which is a strange phrase to find in an annual report. Roughly 7 in 10 listings ended in a sale. Growth went off like a fire. Close of 1996, eBay had 41,000 registered users and had moved $7 million of other people's belongings. A year later, 341,000 users and $95 million. A year after that, 2.2 million users and $745 million. $2.8 billion changed hands across it in 1999, spread over 3,000 product categories. Its users listed 41 million items in the final quarter of that year alone, against 13.6 million in the same 3 months, 12 months before. Something in its character was already shifting. The company noted its product mix moving away from collectibles and toward practical, everyday items, household goods, and office equipment. It had started as where you found the thing you collected. It was becoming where you went for the thing you needed. eBay was formed as a sole proprietorship in September 1995, incorporated in California in May 1996, and reincorporated in Delaware in April 1998. By the time it went public that autumn, it had taken $14.9 million of revenue in 6 months and earned $215,000 on it. Omidyar was 31 and chairman. Margaret Whitman, recruited out of Hasbro, where she had previously worked at Disney, was 41 and running it as president and chief executive. Jeffrey Skoll, the first employee Omidyar ever hired, was 33 and in charge of strategy. Underneath, it was smaller than it sounds. Sun database servers on Oracle, a suite of Pentium machines on Windows NT load balancing from a company called Resonate, and rented facilities in Santa Clara belonging to Exodus and AboveNet. One of the largest marketplaces on Earth sat inside a short equipment list in one American town. Its 1999 annual report, in the section where a company must tell its shareholders what could go wrong, carries this: "We have experienced system failures from time to time. Our website has been interrupted for periods of up to 22 hours. 22 hours. A day, near enough, in which the marketplace was simply not there, and in which, as the filing goes on to admit, the outages create a flood of user questions and complaints that must be responded to by our customer support personnel." That same filing told investors eBay had experienced an unauthorized break-in by a hacker who has stated that he can in the future damage or change our system or take confidential information, and that denial of service attacks had already taken the site off the air. eBay sold safety. It was telling its shareholders that somebody else had a key. Product development spending was $831,000 in 1997. It was $4.6 million in 1998. In 1999, it reached $23.8 million, 28-fold increase in 24 months. That same year brought a bulk listing tool called Mr. Lister 2.0 and a saved search service called Personal Shopper. It launched a scheme named eBay Anywhere, which let you follow an auction on a SkyTel pager or a Palm 7, and it bought a German trading site called alandu.de. On the 3rd of October 2002, eBay acquired PayPal for $1.5 billion and did not spend a cent of cash. The consideration was its own shares, $1.38 billion of them tax-free and stock for stock, with another $96 million covering PayPal options and $16 million in costs. Over the last quarter of that year, $2.1 billion of payments ran through it. The acquisition brought with it a generation of founders who would go on to define the next decade of technology, among them Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, and Reid Hoffman, the group that would later be called the PayPal Mafia. 3 years later, eBay bought something it understood much less well. Skype closed on the 14th of October 2005 for just under $2.6 billion, and $2.33 billion of that was goodwill. The net tangible assets acquired came to minus $1.6 million. 90% of the price was for nothing you could put a hand on. It also bought the price comparison site shopping.com for $685 million, VeriSign's payment gateway business for a further $374 million. 2 years later, eBay conceded the point. Only language that counts. It wrote off $1.39 billion of goodwill, better than half of what it had paid. Net income for the year came in at $350 million against $1.78 billion the following year. 2 years after that, eBay sold about 70% of Skype to a group led by Silver Lake, taking roughly $1.9 billion in cash and a note for $125 million, keeping around 30%. 18 months later, Microsoft agreed to buy Skype outright for $8.5 billion. eBay's remaining stake returned about $2.3 billion, and a pre-tax gain of roughly $1.7 billion. Added up, and eBay took more than $4 billion out of a company it had paid $2.6 for, after telling its shareholders it was worth half that. It was wrong about Skype twice, and the second mistake paid for the first. Margaret Whitman left the chief executive role in 2008. John Donahoe took over and ran the company for the next 7 years, through the turbulence of the Skype exit and into the question that would define the period: what to do with PayPal. By 2014, the activist investor Carl Icahn was pushing publicly for a separation, arguing the payments business had outgrown its parent. Donahoe resisted, then relented. On the 17th of July 2015, under the leadership that followed, eBay distributed PayPal to shareholders as a separate public company, and the payments business it had bought with its own shares walked out on its own 2 feet. Devin Wenig became chief executive of what remained, effective the moment the distribution completed. eBay did not collapse. Revenue bottomed out at $7.43 billion in 2019 and stands at $11.1 billion in 2025, with operating profit in every one of those years. Nothing in the filings supports a story about a company that failed. What the filings do describe is what happened to it, and they name the company doing it. eBay lists Amazon among competitors that are larger than we are, have greater resources, have a dominant and secure position. More telling is the sentence where it sets out what the market now expects and never says who taught it. The expected level of service, eBay writes, has risen on lower or no shipping costs, faster shipping times, and more favorable return policies. A later filing adds that the company may lack the resources to match shipping subsidies from our competitors. Amazon Prime's free 2-day shipping had changed what customers thought was normal. A marketplace holding no inventory cannot subsidize a delivery it never makes. The thing that had made eBay weightless was now the thing pinning it down. In 2021, the company counted 147 million active buyers and roughly 1.5 billion things listed for sale. 4 years later, it had 135 million buyers against 2.5 billion listings. 1 billion more things for sale. 12 million fewer people to buy them. The value of everything sold across the site slid from $87 billion to about 80. The feedback score still worked exactly as designed, and there were fewer people left reading it. Elliott Management noticed in January 2019. Activist Fund wrote publicly to eBay's board saying the funds it managed held over 4% of the company, about $1.4 billion worth, and set out a plan to lift the share price to $63 or more by the end of 2020. It wanted StubHub and the classifieds business separated out and costs cut. And its fifth and final demand was stronger leadership and board oversight. 20 years earlier, most of the width of the United States away, a married couple in Natick, Massachusetts, had started publishing a newsletter. Ina and David Steiner started it in 1999, 4 years after eBay itself. She edited and reported it, he published it, and it began life as Auction Bites before becoming E-commerce Bites in 2011. It was a trade paper for the people whose livelihood sat on these platforms, and it covered eBay closely and without much sentiment. By that summer, with an activist at the gate, executives at eBay were reading it. A federal affidavit sworn by a United States postal inspector records one of them writing about Ina Steiner. If you are ever going to take her down, now is the time. It records a reply from a senior executive who had been told what was planned, and whom the affidavit does not name. 6 words. Embrace managing any bad fallout. Through August, they ran it. They paid for the deliveries with prepaid debit cards and ordered them through anonymous accounts over virtual private networks, on phones and computers bought for the purpose. An email arrived at the Steiners' house on the 10th of August, confirming that a preserved fetal pig had been ordered to their address. At about 4 o'clock that afternoon, a parcel from Amazon was delivered containing a Halloween mask of a bloody pig face. At 14 minutes past 4, an anonymous account messaged Ina Steiner to ask whether the mask had her attention now. A book followed 2 days later called Grief Diaries: Surviving the Loss of a Spouse. A package arrived on the 14th from Carolina Biological Supply of Burlington, North Carolina, containing fly larvae and live spiders, and another from Kansas containing cockroaches. 2 neighbors received parcels addressed to David Steiner. Members of the team traveled to Massachusetts and followed the couple in rented cars. A florist in Cambridge delivered a sympathy wreath on the 15th. When Natick police telephoned the shop, the florist told them the person who ordered it had tried to cancel before completing the transaction and had not managed it. 7 people were charged. The senior director who ran the campaign went to prison for 57 months. One of them wrote to a colleague, "Once you read it, delete this entire thread and don't save to your phone or we will all get fired." Devin Wenig resigned on the 25th of September 2019, before any of this was public. eBay announced that, given a number of considerations, both Devin and the board believe that a new CEO is best for the company at this time. The company later stated that its investigation found no evidence he knew about the campaign in advance or authorized it. In January 2024, eBay itself was charged and signed a 73-page agreement with the federal government to defer prosecution. People working inside eBay met in the summer of 2019 and decided what to send to a woman's house. When the federal charging document came, it had to stop and explain who they were: a husband and wife in Natick who ran a newsletter about selling things online. If you ever sold anything on eBay or cleared out a loft with it, tell us in the comments what you sold. And if you want more stories like this one about the companies that built something enormous and then had to live inside it,